Pottery making is one of the earliest handmade industries of the ancient Egyptians. It came out as an invention based on the needs of everyday life tools like cups and jars and cooking tools. Today, the modern Egyptians are literally following the steps of their ancestors in producing pottery of various designs and colors. Let's find out more about that.
One of the very few monumental findings in Egypt were pieces of pottery. Almost in every ancient excavation site where the earliest civilization started, like Nagada and El Badari in Maadi, in Upper and Lower Egypt. The Egyptians started making pottery out of their daily life needs of pots and jars and plates, and this process changed over extended periods of time. This resulted in giving us the ability to date the historical periods according to the pottery. In the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, there is a special section showing these early pieces of pottery with primitive designs like wavy lines presenting water and figures of women or children. The style and material used in each piece of pottery differed from one city to another, even within the same time frame of the era, as it depended mainly on the soil and silt of the Nile that existed in each part of the country. Clay has always been regarded as a sacred material for the ancient Egyptians. The annual flood of the Nile brought rich silt that covered all the green cultivated land for months, resulting in an extremely silt-rich soil that acted as natural fertilization for the land. Being very perceptive and knowledgeable, the Egyptians knew the effect of the silt and decided to use it in several ways. The first use was building their houses with bricks made of mud. They put the mud into molds, and when they dry, they become bricks ready to be built with. Isis is one of the 9 members of the Ennead of Heliopolis, for she's a daughter of Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the sky goddess, and the sister of Osiris and Set and Nephthys, and the wife of her brother Osiris, and the mother of Hor or Horus. Isis is one of the most famous Egyptian goddesses and the most prevailing in and out of the borders of Egypt. For evidences of her cult in Greece and Italy and Western Europe were found. She represents one of the 3 members of the triad of Osiris, Isis and Horus. She's a symbol of good and giving and motherhood. She's one of the most influencing goddesses in the Egyptian creeds until the end of the Roman period. Her cult has appeared since the most ancient eras and was known since the Old Kingdom as being one of the members of the Ennead of Heliopolis, but not many evidences were found of her before the 5th dynasty. In spite of her vast fame and her creed throughout the ages, we were not lucky enough to know the place of her origin or in which city her cult began. Nevertheless, there is a possibility that her home origin is in the 12th nome of Lower Egypt, in a place known as Izium, referring to Isis. There were a lot of references to it in the Pyramids texts, for the number in which she was mentioned reached almost 80, related mostly to helping out the deceased king. Her cult flourished in the next ages and spread widely, especially through her role in protecting and backing, as her role stretched to the individuals and the common people. Her cult got so spread that she competed with Osiris himself, and she became the goddess of all Egyptians. By time, Isis indulged into relations and was merged with other goddesses, especially Ashtoreth and Bastet, and Nut and Renenwetet, but her most interaction and mingle was with goddess Hathor, who took a lot of her advantages and functional and appearance characteristics.
area of Bilad al-Rum, which means the Romans' lands, lie 4 kilometers west to Deheba and almost 20 kilometers from Siwa. It's situated opposite to Khamisa Spring and Meshandet Spring and their old villages. There are supposed to be villages and houses around that area, but unfortunately, none of the houses remained for 2 reasons. The first is the reclamation of land since ancient times and continuously. And the second reason is that most of the houses were built of mud bricks and rubble and trunks of palms and olives, and their existence close to the level of the surface water led to their demolition. In his book about Siwa, Dr. Fakhri has pointed out that this place could be a Byzantine church based on a text written in the manuscript of Siwa, which mentions that there was a group of Christians or Romans living in that place, and that's the reason behind the name of this area. The temple existed at least until 1869, when it was visited by Rolfs. Caio has described it in details, saying that it's one of the most beautiful monuments he's seen in the Oasis. It's the same Dorian temple mentioned by the early travelers. Its dimensions are 28 meters length from south to north and 7.5 meters breadth from east to west, with a height of 5 meters and thickness of walls reaching 80 centimeters. The entrance of Bilad al-Rum temple faced south and is composed of 3 halls following the Dorian style. In front of the halls was a colonnade 34 meters tall. These entrances were adorned with reliefs, but no texts were carved on the walls. The temple dates back to the 1st century AD and not to the Roman period. Dr. Fakhri also thinks that this place could be a Roman fortress, but new excavations done between 1997 and 2000 proved beyond doubt that most of the tombs adjacent to the temple or the fortress were dug according to the Greek-Roman tombs, and that its constructional elements go back to the Roman period in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, and are similar to the Dorian temple close by, which dates back to the end of the 1st century and the beginning of the 2nd century AD.
When the books of history record the beginning of the Christian era in Egypt, they usually start with the advent of Saint Mark to Alexandria, at the north coast of Egypt. And that is somehow true, for he is the one who came to Egypt as a preacher of Christianity in 65 AD. But if you want to be precise, the first one who set foot in Egypt was Jesus himself, as a baby. It was a dark period of the Romans ruling the ancient world then. The Roman Emperor Herodot ordered the killing of each newborn boy in Bethlehem, following a prophecy that said that the newborn will replace him as a king. Mary the Virgin gave birth at that time to Jesus, and fearing for his life, she decided to flee to Egypt, assisted by Joseph the carpenter. The first part of the Egyptian land they set foot in was Sinai. Sinai Desert is a border of Egypt toward the east, and there was a famous route in the north called Horus Road that was used by the ancient Egyptians themselves to travel to their territories in the northeast all the way to the Euphrates River. The Holy Family traveled in Sinai through harsh circumstances, reaching the Nile Valley and settling in it for almost 3 years. The places where they rested are marked by many landmarks. For example, in Elminia there is a center or a city called El Banasa, where an old tree lies still with its long branches and green leaves, standing witness to the place where Mary and her family rested for a while before continuing their way to the west. Another landmark in the same governorate is Virgin Mary Monastery. The Monastery of Virgin Mary was built around a cave that's also considered an important resting place for the Holy Family. The location itself lies above a hill where the baby hand of Jesus was relieved on its stones when he placed his hand on it to protect his mother from the falling down of that rock.
Aghormi is a main touristic site in Siwa Oasis. It used to be like a capital here, and many people, hundreds of people, lived within its walls and lanes. For thousands of years, it had resisted all the elements of nature, sandstorms and rain. It has resisted all of that. So today it stands with a minaret behind me, made by the Muslims when they came here, as a prominent feature in Siwa Oasis.
The local history of Siwa is written in a book called The Manuscript of Siwa, and it's kept at one of the credible families of the Oasis. According to that book, the ancient city of Siwa existed during the Pharaonic and the Roman times around a huge rock that rises in the midst of the plain valley amongst the palm trees. This city, which was regarded as a capital city of the Oasis, is called Aghormi. It seems that the locals gathered around the rock that contains the Temple of Ammon, which is famous as the Oracle Temple. By the end of the Roman period in Egypt, the god's cult came to an end too, and his temples were abandoned. Being nomads, practicality posed itself on the life of the Syrians, and thus they used the temple and its settlements as a housing area. Moreover, they dismantled its rocks and cut it into small pieces, and with the help of their local strong mud, they built the new houses. A high wall was set at the foot of the rock surrounding Aghormi's houses to protect them from their greatest fear, the barbarians. On top of the wall, there were small windows, each set composed of 3. They would allow the inhabitants of the city to monitor the activities and dangers happening outside. It wasn't long before the barbarians, who were Bedouin Arabian tribes passing through the desert, attacked them constantly. In 1203 AD, Aghormi's residents began their descent and departure from the city. In other words, they ran for their lives, after their number declined severely to be 40 men belonging to just 7 families. They chose a new location where they've built a new city above a mountain, so that they may have more protection and live safely. They gave that location a name. They called it Chali, or the city. The second and final immigration from the city happened in 1928,
when destructive rain fell over the oasis for 3 days continuously, causing many houses to demolish and the rifting of the rest. So the residents had no choice but to leave them and build around the foot of Shalis mountain, which grew to become today's new city of Siwa. The role of the queens in ancient Egypt during the Old and the Middle Kingdoms was not clear and prominent, for the monuments never showed personal characteristics of the roles, but it's possible to know their importance and the amount of wealth and power they enjoyed through their grand tombs. The first well-known queen in the first dynasty is Queen Nit-Hotep or Hotep-Nit, who was known from her great tomb in Nakada, discovered by Morgan in 1897. She takes her name after goddess Nit, who was a main goddess of Sais or Sao in El Gharbiya Governorate, and was one of the triad of Esna Temple in Upper Egypt, being one of the 2 wives of God Khnum, the ram god. His other wife was goddess Menhit, but Nit was the important wife. That's shown in celebrating a special feast in Esna Temple called the Festival of the Arrival of Nit to Sais, the center city of her cult. Queen Nit-Hotep, whose name means Goddess Nit is happy, was well connected to both kings of the first dynasty, King Narmer, the first king of the dynasty, and King Huraha. She could be the wife of one and the daughter of another, and it's possible that the aim of her marriage was to unite between Upper and Lower Egypt. Her title was a wife or a mother. Her tomb in Nakada in Kena was made of limestone. Inside it, several items made of ivory were found, and her name was placed in a serech, or the facade of the palace, which is a royal privilege, which drove some to say that she was a ruling queen, but there isn't a proof of that. In general, a queen in the beginning of the ruling dynasties of ancient Egypt had her own grand tomb, and that was almost 5,000 years ago. Amongst the most prominent queens of the Old Kingdom, and at the very first dynasties of it, is Queen Merit-Nit, who was entitled the Mother of the King. Most probably, she was a wife of King Waji or Jet, or daughter of King Jer, and some think that she was a guardian of her son Den, before he became a king. Her name had appeared on a seal that was found in Abydos, amongst the list of kings from Aha to Den. She was also mentioned in Palermo stone in the Museum of Palermo in Italy, but she wasn't mentioned by the Egyptian historian Maniton. Her name came on a royal ring that was found in Saqqara in a tomb, and it had appeared in the royal serech, which was found in King Den's tomb. So she was named the Mother of the King. Her name stayed partially from the time of Den, and her tomb is one of the greatest tombs of the first dynasty. She has 2 tablets in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo.